So what you see here is now so far what I have modeled in the past 2 hours since I started recording the first start for how to build this mainframe. And in this video, maybe I would like to talk a little bit about, in general, the styling and how to play maybe with the geometry and also get inspired by it, because maybe you draw a sketch, but it's very difficult to build that one. And I always think about a sketch as a thinking process. It might be inspirational and nice, but it's not the end of the road. Once you start working on your design, then actually you might see something different because you work in 3D, and then you furthermore think actually through your design. And specifically for this bike, what I wanted to put an emphasis on is the crease along the midsection. You see, for example, I have the crease along here, I have the crease along my fork, and I have the crease along my handlebar. And for example, I could continue it along the spokes as well. And just to reinforce just some of the modeling techniques, you see here that actually I have, or had first, a triangular face. So a somewhat soft crease, 2 loop cuts, and then here at this point I selected 2 points and then said merge together and did the rest with all those points as well, so they're all single lines. Because you end up with a triangle, it's not necessarily very good geometry, but if we create a loop cut, you can see that the loop cut actually stops at this one edge. So we end up then again with 4 points. So in terms of thinking this to be transferred into NURBS, that's actually a very workable topology. And we also end up with a stronger crease, and then it blends out into a flat surface. And the reason why it nicely fans out is because those points are all more or less at the same line. You can see if I select those points and scale them along the x-axis, nothing moves because they're all lined up on a line. And this way, this crease from here fans out, blends out, and then flows into this flat part. And the two pieces in this bike design I actually like a lot are my handlebar and the fork. For example, you can see here how I have along the midsection my triple crease, so 3 loop cuts, and then at the top part I would like to have a round edge, so I needed to flare those out. Also, for example, this profile should be seen from the side nice and round, so I needed to move those points away in case maybe I quickly bring them back. You can start seeing what will happen. Of course, this one actually got moved, so I have to move it this way a little bit. So bear with me for a moment. But you can see that here this arc comes, kinks, and then goes back to down there. So if you don't want that, you just have in this case to make a stylistical sacrifice that you can have the crease, then the crease blends out, flows into this upper part over the sharp edge. Now another very interesting part is actually my handlebar. So I continued having those side creases, and I employ the same creasing, for example, I did in other parts by blending it out over a flat surface. So those faces seen from the side, you can see they're all flat. So it fans or blends nicely into this shape. And then on the other side here, for example, I have this crease then again, and then it blends out to here. And maybe let's try this out. Do one last crease there. That crease is getting too wide, so I don't really want it there, and just removing that one. Because what I wanted to point out is, if you take a look at, in general, the style, I have a crease, and I have a crease here and there, and right here I have a pretty nice V connection. So in the lower section of my model, the surface is creased and it meets like a Y. And then the upper part, I have this line fanning out so that I do not have this crease in the upper part. So if I, for example, bring this over, there you can see the crease. Of course, it's now dented in, and here it's dented out. But you see that by moving those points to the left, I was able to soften this area. Or initially I did move those points out. Actually, what I did was I had this. I was a cubical cross section, and then I simply decided to move those in. And because already here I had 2 loop cuts, I started having this structure where, hold on one second, let me select all the correct points. There we have it. So you can see how I created a topology where the sharp lines flow along certain directions and then start creasing specific parts of my design. And the reason also why I joined those 2 loop cuts here into one line and the same here was inside this front part of my brake and the handlebar, I did not want another loop cut to be, because it would, seen from a side, make this surface a little bit too linear. And just one loop cut already is enough to straighten it. So you see that there is a little bit of flatness to it, but it's not perfectly flat. There's still very minor curvature going on, and same on the other side. And then I mirrored that part. And then, of course, this bike frame has an arc, and I tried to mimic this arc also with my handlebar, so that not only the stylistical element of creasing is the same, but also a little bit the style and shape of the upper curvature. So in general, the upper part has a slight more organic look. The lower part is a little bit more linear. The faces are more linear, but this is slightly arced. So I bent this one slightly as well. And the handlebar with the brake, you can clearly see, is rotated as well. So I'm completely capturing this motion flow a little bit. And the same is, or I tried to do at least, done the same with the seat. So maybe let's try to see. So that kind of like this curvature follows it here. And that's basically the way how you can play then with repetitive design elements to make everything nice and consistent. And also this model, you see here I have my pedal part and the container, and it's not built into the model. Here I just put in a temporary element for the axis, and the pipe that, for example, holds the seat is also a separate element, so a separate object, because all I want later are just very small fillets. That might be possible with Blender, but I would need to have a denser mesh, and then it's more work than maybe it's worth it, because I can easily bring that through subdivision surface to NURBS converter into alias, and then do the filleting directly only there. So that's, for example, another approach where you just build the individual parts, and where you know that you will just only have a very simple fillet. You can build it. If it's too complicated, don't build it in Blender, do that later in the NURBS part. But for example, something like the handlebar or the front fork, you see how curved the whole object is. Sculpting and building that is just so much faster and more predictable with subdivision surface modeling than with NURBS, because if I would, for example, say, well, maybe I want to play with the proportions, I change already so many different surfaces in alias, the fillets, the trimming, that I'm not even sure if the program could really handle going through different irradiations or versions of modeling so quickly than, for example, here with just some simple push and pulling.